Now, good evening and welcome to 40 Days Bible Study. This is Bible study number 100, and I can't find it, 139, looking at Matthew chapter 2 from verse 7. We're continuing verse 7. Tonight we'll be looking at the conniving way of Herod. All right. Last week we left off where we learned about the leading groups in Israeli society: Sadducees, Pharisees, Sanhedrin Council. And we learned that leaders, proper leaders, good, great, excellent leaders, must be shepherds. And that Herod was a good example of what not to be. We can take examples of what not to be. Tonight we'll be looking at his conniving ways, and we'll be seeing God's providence in situations, God's timing. We'd even see that the star appeared and disappeared. And we'd learn lessons in serving God as we look to Matthew chapter 2, which is coming up on screen now. In verse 7, we see here, Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. He summoned them. That means he didn't ask for them to show up. He didn't ask for them to check him, like, hey, check me out. No, this was an official demand for their presence. You should know the term court summons and how serious a court summons is. So why did he want to summon them? Well, he wanted to get some information, as we see there, ascertained from them, right? The information he wanted was because he was getting panicked about this little king, because he doesn't know of any king, and he's the only king that he knows. So he wants to find out about this king. And you should know very well that the unknown is far more scary than the known. A lot of people, you watch a scary movie and you're going to sleep, you're afraid of what's under your bed because it's unknown. However, if you knew what was under your bed, you wouldn't be afraid because there's nothing there. However, in the moment, what's unknown is frightening. So Herod was afraid of this unknown threat to his throne. Lost people in such a situation really have no hope, and we should feel sorry for them because they don't have the peace that comes with knowing the Lord. So we could imagine Herod's state of mind at that time. Now, this is an example of situational context that we may not pick up if we just read the words without applying thought and analysis in the moment that we read these things. You just read Herod summoned them and determined what time the star appeared. That's it. So Herod was like, hey, what time was the star showing up? Okay, thanks, bye. We would not have noticed the panic state of mind or thought about how worse it would be for him because he's lost. As Herod had greedily asked the Israeli holy men and the Magi about his newest enemy, we can learn some stuff. We can note that he paid no attention to the king himself. He was asking where would he be born? When was the star appearing? Nowhere in this did he ask, is he tall? Is he short? Is he going to be a good king, a bad king? When's he going to rule? Where is he going to go for education? He didn't care about the king. He was so driven to kill and eliminate that king that he didn't even pretend to ask about the character or about any detail that a pretender might, like a pretender like him, is going to pretend and fake interest. So we get the impression that Herod is pretending to be interested in the king. But he's not doing a very good job of pretending to be interested, right? Greed does that to a person. Please be observing the behavior of people in your own lives. The bad people don't care. But the worst ones, they pretend to care. And they are much harder to discern if we don't truly observe their behavior. Many false friends appear to be kind and jovial, so we must observe their fruit carefully. I had someone on Facebook you keep saying test their spirits, but you never say what that means. And I'm like, this person's supposed to be like a scholar in the word because the way the person talks, like, you seem to know everything. Why do I have to explain these things? By their fruit you shall know them. Watch how they act and speak. Listen to how they think when they talk. There is no friend that exists in your life. You do not have a friend unless that friend has Jesus as his focus. I am not talking about, well, I go to church so I could be a friend. No, he or she is not your friend if they are not a friend of Jesus first, because they will never hold loyal to you. Do not be unequally yoked to unbelievers at all. Matthew Henry warned us to be aware of dead faith in men, because men will know the truth but hate the truth because it interferes with their ambitions and their interests. This makes them uneasy. Men like Herod get uneasy when they confront the truth and they oppose the truth. Dead faith here refers to a faith that is not from God because God gives life. Dead faith is a faith that is heard in words, where they will talk like they have faith, but it's not visible in their works. We can't see the heart of a person, but the actions of that person can be seen. And over time, their faith, when tested, it will reveal the true heart of a person. This is why when you have friends, you don't know the true friend until that relationship is tested, until they have a reason to not like you. How do they handle it? Do they go about and bad talk you? Do they hold it against you and treat you badly? You can tell what kind of person it is. Faith trusts what God says. If we have faith, we'll trust what God says more than what we see and what we hear in a moment. So a good example of dead faith was observed when we look at Adam and Eve. They saw a good-looking fruit. They trusted the look of the fruit, and they trusted what they heard from the devil more and over what they heard from God. Of every fruit you shall eat, except the fruit of the knowledge of tree and good of the tree of good and evil, knowledge of good and evil. Adam and Eve chose not to listen to God, and we all suffered. We don't hate on Adam and Eve. We would have done worse. The Magi went to Bethlehem because Herod would have told them to go there. It's an act of God that he did not send soldiers with them to escort them safely, because that would have been a nice pretext. He would have sent the soldiers, go with them. When they find the baby, keep it, report it back to me, and we'll go and kill the baby. That would have been a good plan. It would have been the safest move. But this here is proof of God's protection for us too. You see, when there are evil people with plans to hurt us, if God doesn't want those plans to work, they won't. Do not feel, however, we are free from all harm on this earth because God is watching, so you'll be safe. God does not serve us. We serve God. And as the apostles died, as we see how they died, we look at many unnamed Christians who have testified throughout history. God's people can suffer terrible ends and terrible times. Remember, there were people that were killed for God's word, people that were tortured for it. Jesus first. Please don't ever think that God's protection is a guaranteed thing on this earth. His protection is guaranteed when we enter his kingdom. Spiritual protection while we're here. No Christian can be demon possessed. But it's a different story when it comes to physical. All right. There's no guarantee in this life that we will ever live comfortably. So please do not listen to the false teachers that promote nonsense. Joseph Benson gave further details about Aristobulus being drowned by Herod's attendants after a festive dinner. Herod himself cried, and he had an expensive funeral for Aristobulus. And that was a man he conspired to murder. He conspired to kill the guy, drowned him, had his attendants drown him, and then held an expensive funeral for him and cried at the funeral as if, oh, I'm such an innocent. That's how evil people can be. God sees men's hearts and he will reveal what's in their hearts in his timing. We must always submit to him. I believe that we'll be wiser in situations in a way when we are submissive to God. What I mean is that we might be stumbling along blindly and unaware of the evil people in our lives. We might be unaware of the plans in our lives. But when we are submissive, God will reveal their hearts, they will slip, or they will leave. Inexplicably, they will leave. It is totally God's work. It has nothing to do when we submit to him that we'll be smarter, or we'll be more discerning, we'll have the power of discernment. It's not necessarily that. We could. But if we are submissive to God, you will find that, yes, you'll have to make some decisions to clean out your social circles. But at the same time, the social circles themselves get cleaned out automatically because the Spirit of God drives away the spirit of the enemy. God will take care of us in miraculous ways, ways that we can't make or unmake. If we truly walk in faith, we may never know what we dodged as people leave our lives. And this is a real one. Some people will be in your life, and when you submit more to God, they disappear. Either they fall out with you, or they just leave, or just quietly, they just stop talking to you much. And you prosper more with that person gone. Spiritually, I don't mean you'll get money. Let's take a look at verse 9. All right, because we just looked at verse 7 and verse 8. We were looking at 7 and 8 together. Verse 9 says, after listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. Now, at first I was reading this and I didn't know how it was done because they left Herod and followed the star. And I thought, when they went to Herod, they just chose not to follow the star. They were just asking people around because that's what would make sense to me. But that's not what happened. This is why we never say, what does this mean to me when we're reading the Bible? We look for the real meanings. They follow the star. And let's think about it. When can a person follow a star? Can't do that in the day. So they had to be traveling at night, which also was a custom of people who lived in the desert and other hot climates to indicate who these gentlemen were, where they came from. Seeing the word here, behold the star, it implies that the star was not shining for part of their journey as well. Behold makes it sound like the star came back. In verse 10, we see that they rejoice at the sight of the star. They rejoiced. And we'll talk about that to get to verse 10. And that indicates that it disappeared for a little bit. This here is paralleled for us as we sometimes encounter struggles in life and nothing seems to be happening to change or improve the situation. Even though You're praying, you're submitting to God more. Now, I advocate growing closer to God in tough times. But while I say that, I remind us not fall for the trap. Things are bad. God, 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 God. Things are good. There's no God, God, God. We don't go to him as often when things get better. That's a trap. Don't fall into that trap. The star here in our situation, it would disappear for a while. And we'd think that we're going through the problems alone. But you see, God has his timing for us in order to get the best out of the situation. And this is hard for us to accept sometimes. We are not the central figure in our story. The day you become saved, it's no longer my life, my story. The day you become saved, we have to start changing our thinking. Your life, God, your story. How do I play my part? Because it's no longer my part. It's no longer my life. All to thee I surrender. That's how it's supposed to be. The disappearance of the star was now in this we could look back and tell the star had to disappear for them to meet Herod so that we could learn lessons from their meeting with Herod. We would not have seen his conniving ways. We would not have seen his greed. The star disappearing in that time was not for them, not for the Magi, but it was for us. Again, God works things out so perfectly for people that we're reading about here that it's done for them. It's also done for us. And we're reading this thousands of years later. If you look back at the little lessons we learned from these incidents, all of that was because God wanted it to be like that. And for it to be like that, the star had to disappear. Benson speculates that the glory of the Lord had shone around the shepherds. In Luke, we would have read in Luke that the glory of God shone when the shepherds were told. And as that glory of God was like a light and it would go higher and higher, it might have been seen by the Magi very far away. And that might have drawn them to come. And now we know, because we were doing some studies on heaven, the three heavens, the atmosphere is the first heaven. So rising glory of God in heaven, rising glory of God in the first heaven, which is the atmosphere, it would be seen for miles around. Albert Benson and others also suggested that the star itself wasn't a star. It would have been a meteor of some kind. And this would explain the movement, standing still at times. Now, I don't know if he's right there. I don't know if they are right. But I do know that God does amazing things. So whether it was a meteor or not, we can't decide, we can't be sure of at this point. But the thing is, it's an impressive action, it's an impressive situation, it's an impressive revelation of God's goodness, because we can't make a meteor, we can't make it move, we can't make it stop. God did this for some pagans in a foreign country to travel all this way to give Jesus rich gifts. Also for us to see how bad Herod was and to follow through on the story of how delinquent the chief priests and they were. Because remember, they knew and they didn't go looking. That was last week. Matthew Henry shares an insightful take on the Magi finding baby Jesus, something some people don't notice. The Magi were looking for a king. They might have been disappointed to find Jesus in squalid condition because they were looking for a king palace. Where's your palace, king? But did they reject him after they saw this poverty? They didn't. They saw whatever they saw, and they still bestowed their rich gifts to him. This brings to mind the way people treat Jesus now. Many people go to Jesus with expectations. We are told by some preachers, go to God expecting a miracle. That's true. But the miracle you should expect is not the miracle you want for your selfish self. The miracle you should expect is the miracle of salvation, first of all. Once you get that, you don't need anything else. But God is gracious. He gives more than that. While we're here, you might get the miracle of health, healing, deliverance, restoration, favor, prosperity, suffering. Because suffering builds character too. Many people go to him with their own selfish needs and wants based on their perspective. And this is usually based on false teachers and false messages. We're doing some talk on some false teacher experiences and really bad mismanagement of God's work in churches today. We started it yesterday. We'll do some more tomorrow at 9 o'clock as well. I've even heard John Hagee say to congregations that God owes us when we do things for him. That is very brazen. But Hagee gets away with it because people respect him. I guess being old and fat makes you respectable. It doesn't, by the way. The word of God is the word of God. God is no respecter of persons. God is supreme. There is no way a supreme God owes you or I anything. He's promised stuff, but doesn't owe us. Hagee said that when I heard him, to tell people that their bills will be miraculously paid by God. The number of times I've heard TBN preachers talk about their bills being paid and people sending miraculous letters in. A check came in the mail, a check came in. I don't know where these checks coming from in the mail to pay these people's bills that these preachers would talk about. And I could never figure it out. But I guarantee you, God is not writing checks for anybody. Many people go to church or churches and get disappointed because they are not going with a mind or a heart after God. They are going to receive. They're going to try to get good feelings, to get encouragement, to get motivation, to get status, to get money. Some people boast like, I go to this church, I go to that church, and they expect you to be impressed. My friend, if you want to be impressive by the church you go to, you're not serving God. If you want to be impressive, be humble. And then you'll realize, wait, I shouldn't be impressive. I shouldn't try to be impressive because I'm not. Unfortunately, when they go with those motives, those wrong motives, the church leader tries to give these things from himself or worse, herself, and nothing a person could give us is as good as whatever we can get from God. Pastors try to encourage people with kind words and ego-building garbage that keeps their pews filled. Unfortunately, those pews are filled with goats. Goats who will be placed on the left side of Jesus when he separates the sheep from the goats. And guess where the goats go? Anybody? That's right. The goats will go to hell. Our lesson from the Magi here is that we must throw away all our expectations, because they would have had expectations of seeing a king. Throw away your expectations, because your expectations, one, they're not grand enough. Two, your expectations are based on the flesh. God is spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit, common S, and in truth. And your spirit, common S, must be led by the spirit, capital S, God's spirit, which is how we'll be led in truth. We must throw away our expectations and submit to his way. When we do that, that's how we get filled with the Holy, capital S, Spirit. That is the pathway to walking in the power of God, to praying with power, to seeing miracles, and seeing the hand of God move in our lives and the lives of people around us. Now, by no means am I saying that God is waiting on us to do things to allow him to work or to make him work. If your God needs your permission, who's the God there? I am saying, when we're filled with the Spirit, these miraculous things, your eyes will see them. People in the natural world will not see it as a miracle. They will not see the miracles that you will see. The miracles will happen. They just wouldn't see it and recognize it. So their lives will not be enriched. The whole story here of finding young Jesus reminds us that the ones who seek him diligently will find him. People may ask, and some people have asked, how to know if I am saved? They should be asking, how am I not glorifying God in my life? We are all in this boat where we have to ask ourselves that. Are you dropping off old ways in submission to God? Some people say, I'm trying, but it's so hard. Keep trying. Some people say, well, I do in some ways, but not others because I don't want to let go of this and let go of that. Pray for submission to his will. Here's another question you could ask yourself. Are you growing in knowledge of the word because you are diligently seeking him like people seek buried treasure? So if you're dropping off old ways and you're seeking him diligently in his word, you can say, yes, you're saved. Those are evidence, pieces of evidence of being saved. Jameson Fawcett Brown asks the question of the chief priests regarding their absence from Jesus' birth and Jesus' baby life. Why didn't the chief priests go searching for Jesus? Matthew Poole suggested that Herod didn't tell the chief priests, so they wouldn't know about the Magi. But think now, this is not eisegesis, at least I believe it's not. These tanties, the chief priests, they would always know the latest gossip because that's how they operate. And they would have figured, if Herod was asking about the Messiah, there must have been a reason to ask. So they would have shown interest and gone looking, hey, anybody seen a Messiah around? There were two pieces of evidence given and available to these priests that would have caused them or should have caused them to launch an investigation or a search all over Bethlehem to find that Messiah. The Magi would have been a public topic. Everybody would have known these men from the east were there searching, and they would have known why they were searching. These chief priests would have wanted to push themselves up to the Magi because they would have been wealthy visitors, special travelers. So the Magi want the status of being, hey, yes, we're on friendly terms with these guys. So they would have known. And two, Herod asked about it. Two totally different, clear and separate pieces of evidence pointing to a Messiah. But they did not look. They were more concerned with going out in public and getting people to greet them, and acting holy and wearing their little robes, going in the public places, having sycophants, feeding their egos. They didn't have time to go searching for the Messiah. If the Messiah wanted to be found, he could come and find them himself because they'd be easy to spot in their fancy robes. And when he finds them, they would validate the Messiah and they would endorse the Messiah so he could go and Messiah his way across Israel. That's the attitude they would have had. And that's the attitude a lot of us have today. Many people are like, I'll search for Jesus when the time is right. Right now is not that time. It's 8:29. I want to go to verse 10 and 11, but I won't. I have them prepared, but I'll stop here. So let me just close off the YouTube part of our night. To those of you watching, thank you very much for being here to share with us. This is Bible study number 139. We just did Matthew 2, finishing verse 7, verse 8, and verse 9. Thanks very much for watching us and being here.